violence and all kinds of things that make it unusual. But is that, that's an issue. In terms of bias, which is what you're talking about, excuse me, I should talk in the microphone. In terms of bias, this is a bigger issue than for tonight. We can't, researchers generally talk about disparities, okay, first, because it's hard to determine. Bias involves motive and knowing exactly what, but there are disparities. And so differences by race and by gender, by age, by all kinds of things. Young black males and young Hispanic males are stopped and used force a lot more than, not just everywhere in the country. But you need the right baseline. So you need the right denominator to determine, you know, and we talked about this in one of our reports. I kind of gave the city credit for, in the Bureau for looking at, for example, traffic stops, looking at what the rate of traffic accidents were in that neighborhood as a good benchmark and denominator. You know, so we don't have this figured out yet nationally. There's a lot of people talking about what's the appropriate benchmarks to determine whether there's really race bias. And I encourage you guys to look into that. I'd be happy to give you some references. But, so I'm uncomfortable answering that right away. I did say in my report that looks like, you know, when you adjust for some of these things, the problem isn't as bad as I thought it was. I did not want to get into evaluate the gang unit. That was a whole nother issue, and the auditor has taken that on. So, but anyway, yeah, you're raising some good points here, and but I think that my last comment to you would be, again, the outcomes were not a main focus of the settlement agreement. The process was, but we did look at some outcomes. But it's also, when you say, you know, it doesn't seem to be having any effect at all, it's almost too soon, I would argue.
I would agree, it's too soon.
Yeah, too soon to expect the outcomes which aren't in the settlement agreement.
And too soon to say it's substantially compliant because of that.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay. Tom wants to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sure. What I wanted to do is also, in the conversation about the health population, I also wanted to bring that back into the fold of systems and PCB's ability to identify trends and implement an improvement process. So one of the things that they did that we reported on this report is that they now have 5 BHRT teams. One of those teams is solely dedicated to the houseless population. So when you see a large amount of interactions between police and houseless, in the houseless population, one of the things that they did is that they're now sending out the BHRT teams to see if they can to provide services or to coordinate with services, not provide services, but to have services coordination. And so one of the things that we've measured is BHRT effective? And one of the things that we've seen is that, yes, prior to BHRT intervention, you had a significantly higher number of police interactions than after BHRT intervention. So the fact that PPB can now identify those trends and dispatch a team dedicated solely to the houseless population in an attempt to reduce those interactions, that again brings us back to, have they implemented systems to resolve issues on their own? And there's one of the examples of them being able to do that. And so I just wanted to bring that conversation back into the systems aspect of it.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you both for responding. Britt?
You and Elliot actually covered most of what I wanted to talk about. This might be a stupid question, I wasn't here for the presentation, but in terms of the training, I was reading about the scenario training that's been implemented recently. And in terms of the debrief, so I was interested to read that a lot of officers were struggling with the training at first. In terms of the debrief, is it mostly just the instructors talking to or sharing their own takeaways with officers, or is there actually a way to have officers reflect themselves and like actively rework through some of these things so that they are able to make improvements and not just move on after hearing a lecture that they don't really listen to? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that's good. First of all, it isn't a lecture. They're actually engaging with a person in an encounter, an actor, and they don't know what this actor is going to do.
Yeah, I meant for the debrief afterwards.
Yeah,
After
so
the
then there's a
scenario.
debrief, but you're absolutely raising some good points. So the debrief was pretty sophisticated. It did ask them to talk about what they did and why they did it, and to think through their actions. And then they more and more engaged them. And then they asked them how that tied into procedural justice and some of the concepts. And then they gave them actual feedback on their performance. They got it rated and evaluated on like a 3-point scale. And so there was a system created to give feedback to each officer immediately after the encounter. And you could fail if you really did horrible. I don't know that anybody did, but they did vary. There was variation in their scores, and it correlated highly with my own observations. So I thought they did a pretty good job.
Thank you.
Great question, Britt. Patrick?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Homelessness is not mentioned in this at all. But what is mentioned is mental illness. And I would like to can you guess which two groups of people are least likely to report when you ask them to report? People of color and people with mental illnesses, right?
Yeah.
Which are the
To report what?
that they've had a negative incident with the police.
Oh, out of fear.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then secondly, I am somebody who lives in East County, and I feel it's really important to pay attention to such things. Or I live in East Portland, I should say, not East County. I am somebody who is on the PSEP. I probably would expect a invite of some sort, and I can honestly say that I'm not aware of when the annual report was to my precinct. So maybe they're just not effective at getting it out, or maybe there was causality somewhere there. I do want to say thank you for recognizing that you're passing the baton, and that you are recognize that substantial compliance is not a means is not the be-all, end-all of a record, and it does recognize that there is room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments, and I'll just say that I totally agree with you that they might be less likely to report on a survey. Hopefully they would, because the surveys are anonymous and people are told that. They may not trust that, but and I also hope the complaint system, I can't remember here, I think it's moderately good with IPR, but you also don't want people to be afraid to
I agree totally, but
Yeah.
for instance, there are times in my life when I would not feel comfortable reporting an incident that the police had with me.
And that has to do with
Can
trust.
you speak in the microphone, please? Dr. Rosenbaum?
Oh, sorry. That has to do with trust, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to swing it back down to the center of the table. I just want to let everybody know we're going to take a break after all the PSEP members give a comment, just because there's been such a long section here, and then we'll come back to public comment. We have Sam down there, and then we'll go back this way.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I don't have a problem with finding substantial compliance. When looking at the document and what it says and what's required, I think all the things that are coming up are important issues, and I don't minimize any of them, but I think those are issues for us to take up for PSEP to take up moving forward. The substantial compliance is not, again, it's been said, not the be-all to end-all. And I think when Mayor Wheeler created the PSEP, his thought and his hope is that it would outlast the DOJ and the settlement agreement, and that we would still be working together with the community and the police to make sure that these issues are addressed, and that the police continue to do the work that the Department of Justice settlement agreement says and the community expects. I see this as we're not at the finish line, but like we're coming out of the blocks. It's the start. It's the beginning of change, and I do think over the last 5 years there's been a lot of improvement from the Portland Police and the community engagement, and we're in a different place than we were. That doesn't mean we're where we want to be by any means. When people are still being shot and killed and profiling, we still have a lot of issues to deal with. But I don't have a problem with substantial compliance.
Thank you for that perspective, Sam. Steve?
So my question is, you've actually studied other cities who've gone through similar types of reviews from the Justice Department and so forth. And it's interesting to me that there's a lot of, every incident of the police showing up and dealing with these things starts with somebody called. Or, usually somebody called. So that goes to BOAC. And it's interesting that the review of BOAC procedures are done just by the Behavioral Health Unit and the Behavioral Health Unit Assistant Chief. And I'm not familiar if that department, who carries a heavy weight, has any kind of other advisory committees that oversee the procedures and the metrics that that are needed to ensure that the police officers have all the right information, that these procedures continue to follow. I just don't know how in the future they will be held accountable. That's the question I have.
Yeah, well, there is a BHU advisory council, a committee, and that oversees, and that has a number of entities on it, not just police related. And that's an oversight committee. I don't know if you're aware of that or.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. My thing is BOAC.
Oh,
It's the actual communication folks.
Gotcha.
I know there's a ton of advisory committees for the Portland Police.
Yes.
Are there any over them to ensure that they're doing best practices?
Not to my knowledge. Does you want to answer that, Chief? Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Bob Causey, Director of BOEC. And when you ask about the accountability, I think you're looking at in terms of making sure that our dispatchers and call takers are following the procedures. We have a user board that oversees our operations. They help us establish policy. We also have not as robust as I'd like it to be, but we're in the process of developing our quality assurance program. And that is starting with medical and fire call taking triage. We're just now implementing a new program. In fact, our kickoff is next Monday to integrate medical and fire triage within our call taking and integrate it in the computer system. Police calls for service are a little bit different. We're not going to be integrating that right away. But our hope is that within a year, we're going to have an established quality assurance program specifically tied to medical calls and fire calls. After that, it's probably another year beyond that time frame to be able to implement the police call-taking protocol that's integrated within the system. With those protocols integrated, we're able to do set quality assurance that is prescribed. I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head. Prescribed number of calls that we review. But in the meantime, we are reviewing calls that are assigned to BHU and those types of mental health triage calls.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you state your name one more time for us?
Yeah, Bob.
Okay, we're going to finish off with Lakeisha.
I think a lot has been said. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. We are going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be starting back at 7:25. And we'll get going on that. Thank you.